The Game Boy mods give these consoles a second life. We already looked at the original and the advanced mods, but what about the Game Boy Color? Let's look at the modifications for the Game Boy Color. Okay, first things first, I'm not going to mod my Game Boy Color, so thanks for watching. Okay, I'm not going to mod my Game Boy Color because I just got it a few weeks ago, but eventually I probably will. The other reason being,
in terms of money, we have no money.
Don't worry, I'll still be here through the guide. Here's my hand. Psych! Buck up, Bart, come on, you got this. Now let's open the Game Boy up, huh? Safety first. Let's start with the console shells. Fortunately for you, there are a lot of options for the Game Boy Color. The shells for the Game Boy Color can be split into two categories. The shells for the original screens, meaning that you can replace these shells if you want to keep your original screen. Usually if you just want to reshell a Game Boy and need a replacement, or you want a different color. Now that doesn't mean you can't use these with a new screen mod, but we'll get to that later. The websites I use for this video are the usual ones: Retro Game Repair Shop, Handheld Legend, and some from eBay. On the Retro Shop, these shells are about $10.99. Pretty good price, and they're over a dozen colors, including transparent ones. Now if you want something a bit fancier, they have these high quality shells for $16.99. These are also for the original screen, but both of them can be modded to fit new screen mods. You just have to cut some plastic on those shells around the screen. The $16.99 ones come in more unique colors, like the plated gold or more translucent colors. There's also an IPS ready shells, and these shells are ready for the IPS kit, and they even have the battery compartment without the plastic in between the two batteries, so you can slap in a battery mod without having to cut the shell. This one is compatible with the specific IPS V2 kit though. The fancy shells are UV shells with custom designs like this Luigi one or this Pokemon one. They're actually on sale as of the recording of this video for about 25 bucks, but a lot of them are usually sold out. But enough about shells now. Let's take a look at the other sites later, but let's move on to the displays. The screens. First, let's talk about the no soldering type of screens, you know, the drop-in mods. Currently on sale for $51.99, the Retro Game Repair Shop has a TFT screen, but one of the newest screens they offer now is an IPS drop-in ready screen with no soldering required as well, or any shell modifications. The installation with this screen is pretty easy. You basically remove your old screen, connect the new screen to the board that it comes with, then you fold the ribbon cable to the back and then connect the ribbon cable to where your old screen was connected to your Game Boy. And don't worry, I'll have links to all the screen mods and things like that in the description. But if you want to get real fancy, well, they have some screens that are called the laminated Q5 screens, which have a backlight for the Game Boy Color logo. They also have a non-laminated version, and what that basically means is that some people notice that there's a gap between the screen and the screen lens or the cover lens, and sometimes dust gets in there, and I've actually noticed this on some of my Game Boy Advance mods. So if you want to have less of a quote-unquote gap or things like that, and probably a cleaner looking screen, then you go for these laminated screens, which they were able to make by, running these screens through a laminator. Come on now, you remember the joke from the last video? Come on now. The Q5 IPS laminated screen doesn't actually require any soldering, but that's if you don't want the OSD menu. The OSD menu is mentioned in a few of these screen mods, and it lets you properly align the image after the installation, just in case you didn't have it centered completely perfect. Most of these mods require you to do a little bit of soldering to be able to access that OSD menu. But you can still change the brightness and maybe the color palettes if it's in that mod without having to solder. On the Handheld Legend website, they have the same and similar type of screens, including that Q5 IPS kit. But this website tells you a little bit more of what's compatible with that mod, including the shells and the different accessories. Although the Retro Shop kind of does that too now, but not for every description or screen mod. And it seems like there is actually a lot of different screen mods to choose from. Definitely more than I thought there was. But let's break it down a little bit. The most economical option would be the IPS backlight with a color palette for $49.99, normally at $58.99, but for 50 bucks, the IPS is going to look great. This mod doesn't require any soldering, and it still has brightness controls and the color palette as mentioned before, just using the touch sensors, just like my Game Boy Advance mod. There's also a very similar screen with the added OSD menu, but without having to solder, in this case for $59.99, but that mod is usually sold out whenever I check their website. Now the best screen mod that I think is the best if money isn't an issue or soldering or anything like that is the Funny Playing Q5 IPS laminated with the logo backlight. The laminated screen is going to ensure no dust gets under the cover, and the backlight will make the logo stand out. The downside slash upside is that this kit is compatible with the funny playing shells, otherwise you're going to have to cut your original shell up to fit the screen. But this screen with those custom nice UV shells from earlier are going to be those nice looking Game Boy colors that you see on online and videos and things like that. Now the other option I think would be one of the best screen mods, but it's specifically just because of the one feature it has, is the HDMI Out mod for about $70. This screen is also an IPS screen, and you're going to have to solder to 4 different points and another 3 if you want that OSD menu. You're also going to have to modify your shell to fit the screen, but all that extra work is worth it for the TV out. It's 720p. It also has a backlight on the Game Boy Color logo, which you can change using that OSD menu. The screen is also 25% bigger than the original screen. The only downside is that the screen isn't laminated, if that was something that you were going for. I also wanted to mention that IPS Q5 screen is also available in a non-laminated version, but the non-laminated version has the ability to change the color on the Game Boy Color logo. So basically every screen mod has its pros and cons, and more will eventually come out, which will probably combine the features from the previous ones into one. Well, for now, let's move on to the batteries. Battery-wise, the Game Boy Color battery mods seem to be a little more advanced than like the Game Boy Advance ones. For example, there's a Funny Play battery mod that's $24.99, but it only charges, it doesn't regulate the current or the power going to the Game Boy, and you have to turn the Game Boy off to charge it. It also requires a bit of soldering, and you actually have to remove some fuses and solder on some capacitors. And as we've seen in other videos, the Retro Game Repair Shop has videos straight on their website on the installation of these mods or batteries. Not all of them, but it's the same creator. I think pronounced like Makho or something. You know, now again, I don't know who this is. I'm not sponsored. Come on, we're doing this again. They also have a USB-C one for about $45 called the USB-C Pro Charging Kit. It also requires a bit of soldering and other components, and this one doesn't even include the battery. The battery mod that I found to probably be the easiest, and it's kind of just like a drop-in one, would be one from the Handheld Legends website, and it's the Clean Juice Air Game Boy Color Wireless Rechargeable Battery Module. Say that 3 times. Basically, it's a wireless charging battery for a Game Boy Color that you just drop in. But it's also only compatible with their Retro 6 shell, meaning if you have a regular shell, you probably have to modify it and cut it, and they don't actually recommend that. But for $35, and it includes wireless charging, it's not that bad. But my experience with wireless charging on the Game Boys is that it's not as good as plain old plugging in your Game Boy to charge. I did make a video on making a wireless charger for the Game Boy Advance, but I ended up taking it off because over time I felt like it was just overheating, and maybe the wireless charger I bought was kind of a little low quality cheap one that I found on eBay, but I'll still kind of work on that and improve it as I go. Now, since the Game Boy Color battery mods do require a bit of soldering and swapping capacitors and whatnot, and you don't feel comfortable with that, well, the good old batteries trick will work just fine. I mean, maybe some rechargeable ones, although the IPS mods will drain the battery faster. I'm guessing that's why they sell rechargeable batteries with a rechargeable charger on the Retro Game Repair Shop with all the different mods for the different Game Boys. But what about accessories, huh? Well, what about them? Well, there's cover lenses, like Pokemon ones, holographic ones, there's battery covers, custom game cartridges, console bags, chargers, different stickers like holographic stickers, and of course replacement parts for anything, including the different screens, and also speakers for your Game Boy Color. But why don't we talk about the pricing, huh? I mean, you can always buy a pre-modded Game Boy Color. I mean, it's available on the Handheld Legends website for about $280, and on the Retro Game Repair Shop, they also have an external site where they're a little cheaper at $229. But you have to add a battery mod at checkout for an extra $60. Expensive? Yes. But let's do the math. Let's do 2 scenarios. One if you already own a Game Boy Color, and one if you don't. If you already have the console, let's split it down even further. First, let's go with the more expensive example. An IPS Q5 laminated screen, or a non-laminated screen if you want to have the option of the color changes on the Game Boy Color logo. Both are the same price. Add on a UV IPS ready shell. Let's go with this Charizard one. So 25, but what? You don't like Charizard? Okay, fine. We'll go with the Squirtle one. No Squirtle either, huh? Okay, fine. The Luigi shell. Can't hate Luigi, am I right? Add another $50 for the Pro battery, only the best, of course. Since it doesn't come with a battery, add a battery for about $12. And you're going to need a funny playing speaker, so add another $4 and a new capacitor that you replace the old one with. So $2 more. Don't forget the cover lens, the Q5 IPS compatible holographic one, for about $4. Also, the UV shells don't come with buttons, so another $5. And finally, some stickers for the barcode and whatnot, so $2 for that, coming out to a grand total of around $160, give or take, depending on your selection. Okay, real quick, let's see the price for the cheapest possible option. $49.99 for the screen, no new shell since it's the same size, $24.99 for the funny playing battery mod, which will require you to cut the plastic in between the batteries in the battery compartment. So it comes out to about $74 or $75, or $87 if you do want to get a new shell for about $10, which you'll still have to trim the battery compartment, but these come with buttons. And also I've added some stickers, so around an $80 difference gets you the better battery mod, the laminated screen with the backlight logo, and the custom shell. If you don't already have a Game Boy Color, but most places have Game Boy Colors averaging between $60 to $80. Let's go with 65, to average it out. So some are more expensive like the special edition ones, but you ain't getting those to mod unless you're rich or something, or you already own one. So without the console, you're looking at about over $200 for a UV IPS laminated with the custom buttons and all that, give or take if you want an HDMI Out screen or more expensive custom shells or light up buttons as well. And around $150 for the cheap and modded options. Considering the price, I did find some listings online on Game Boy Colors with an IPS mod for about $180. They don't include the battery at this price, but it's only a $30 difference. But if you were going to buy a modded Game Boy Color, why are you here, Mods or no mods, playing the game is what's important. So for me, I'll mod it eventually, or I'll buy a second Game Boy Color specifically to mod it. I did purchase one accessory for it though, a worm light. Let's go ahead and try it out. It's pretty bright, brighter than I thought it was going to be. Is it getting brighter? My safety glasses are cracking.